Hello guys, I'm Tivanny Meilina from class Sasing B 2018. This video is to fulfill the final semester examination of Literary History course. The question number 1, what did you learn from this class? In 18th century era, in 1688, the Great Revolution firmly established a Protestant monarchy along with an effective government. Everything human behavior will be based on a rational order. These values reach literary expression in Alexander Pope poetry. Jonathan Swift's brilliant satirical prose was not so optimistic, with result in crushing attacks on his age in A Tale of a Tub and Gulliver's Travel, and A Modest Proposal. The 18th century ran from January 1, 1701 to December 31, 1799. During this time, elements of thought peaked in America, French, and the Haitian Revolution. During this century, also the slave trade and human trafficking developed on a global scale. The revolution also began to challenge the monarchical and aristocratic power structure, including the structure and beliefs that support both. In the century, some people have felt dreams come true with the revolution of 1789, even though they were compromised by access to the government of terror. Many European monarchies won enlightenment ideals, but the French Revolution made them fearful of losing power. And the Ottoman Empire took part in the European wars of 1740 until 1768. Consequently, they didn't get European military repair in the 7 Years' War and suffered defeat against Russia. The colonization of Europe in America and other parts of the world intensified, and the mass migration of the people involved grew larger as the age of sails continued. Great Britain became a major power worldwide with the French and Indian Wars in the 1760s and the conquest of much of India, especially Bengal. However, Britain lost many of its North American colonies after the American Revolution and the Indian Wars. In North America, the defeat of Britain resulted in the creation of an independent United States. And for the Romantic era originated in 18th century Western Europe during the Industrial Revolution. This revolution was a revolution against the aristocratic, social, and political norms of the Enlightenment period. Intellectual attitudes or orientation that characterized literary works, painting, music, architecture, criticism, and historiography. Romanticism emphasized the individual, subjective, irrational, imaginative, personal, and spontaneous. The characteristic attitude of romance is an appreciation of natural beauty, appreciation of emotions, surrender, and mental potential. Romanticism is a tale of chivalrous adventure in exotic and mysterious individual heroism with elegant formality and classical literary forms such as French neoclassical or English heroism. The ideology of events surrounding the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution are thought to have influenced this movement. Romanticism glorifies success, the success of what it sees as heroic figures and artists who have misunderstood and who have transformed society. It also legitimized the individual imagination as a critical authority, allowing freedom from classical understanding of forms in art. Next, Victorian era. The Victorian era is that era led by the reign of Queen Victoria from 20 June 18 1837 until her death on 22 January 1901. In this period, there is peace, prosperity, glory of Britain. This era begins with the George era and the Edward era. During the Victorian period, England was a strong country with a rich culture. The Edwardian era. In 1901, after Queen Victoria's death, her eldest son Edward VII spanned the reign until 1910. Edward was a fashionable elite leader who loved luxury and defined a style sustained by European art and fashion. This era underwent major changes in politics. Although the Edwardian era was short, these were the years when arts and crafts flourished in England. Next, Modernism era. Modernism era is the relationship between humans and the environment in modern times. In this era, separating the past and simultaneously forming new expressions. Modernism era experimented in art from the late 19th century to the middle 20th century, particularly after World War I. Industrialization, rapid social change, and advances in science and social science technology. The first feature associated with modernism is nihilism, the rejection of all religious and moral principles as the only means of achieving social progress. In other words, modernists reject the moral code of the society in which they live. The reason they do so is not necessarily because they do not believe in God, even though most of them are atheists, or that they experience serious doubts about the meaning of life. On the contrary, their rejection of conventional morality is based on its arbitrariness, conformity, and exertion to control human feelings. In other words, the rules of behavior are the limiting forces of the human psyche. Modernists believe that in order for a person to feel whole and to become a contributor to reviving the social process, he must be free from all the burdens that weighed hundreds of years of hypocrisy. 20th Century Era. The 20th century began on January 1, 1901, and ended on December 31, 2000. The 20th century was a period of radical departure in almost every area of human activity before it. Accelerated scientific understanding, better communication, faster transportation changed the world in those 100 years more than at any time in the past. It was a century that began with the steamship as the most advanced means of transportation and ended with the shuttle, horses, and the other transport animals. Western human personal transport has been replaced for thousands of years by cars within a few decades. The 20th century saw extraordinary changes in the way of life of many people as a result of technological, medical, social, ideological, and political innovations. Arguably, more technological progress occurred in the 10 years period after World War I than the total number of new technological developments in the previous century. Terms such as ideology, world war, genocide, and nuclear war entered common usage and become influences in the lives of ordinary people. The 21st century era. The 21st century era began on January 1, 2001 and will end on December 31, 2100. This century has been marked by the rise of the global economy and third world consumerism, global concern for terrorism, and increase in private enterprise. The era of 20th century brings people to live a fast lifestyle and is known for a new era including the birth of technology. Second question, What was the lesson learned of this class? With the material studied and by making videos on each assignment, I better understand the history that exists in literature, such as in the 18th century, which started on January 1, 1701 and ended December 31, 1799. In the century, the revolution began to challenge many politics, monarchical, and aristocratic power. The monarchs in Europe want Enlightenment ideals, but the French Revolution made them afraid of losing power. And it continues in the Romantic era that begins in the 18th century during the Industrial Revolution, which many went against the rules of aristocracy and politics during the Enlightenment period. Romantic era, which focused more on natural beauty, emotional openness, mood, examination of human personality and mental. In the Victorian era, led by Queen Victoria in the United Kingdom, during this period, the people of Great Britain felt greatness, prosperity, and peace. And after Queen Victoria's death, continued with the Edwardian era led by the eldest son of Queen Victoria. The reign of the Edwardian king wasn't that long, but it was during this time the arts, skill, and craft flourished in England. And at the time of modernism, art in Europe began in the 1800. In this era, the theory of relativity was discovered, the start of industrialization and social science which provoked new styles in the arts. And it was in this era that technology began to develop. It continues in the 20th century, which witnessed tremendous changes in the way of life of many people as a result of technological, medical, social, ideological, and political innovations. For example, steam-powered ships are the most sophisticated means of transportation and with the shuttle. The end of 20th century era was continued with the 21st century, which was marked by the rise of the global economy and global concern for terrorism. And the last question, what is the next plan after joining this class? Maybe it will be studied more deeply and maybe it can be used as some material for my thesis if I enter literature. I think that's all from me and thank you.